Strat Guide to Heart of Fear, the Blade Lord Taza encounter. This guide will cover the essentials in the encounter for our everyday raider. Please note that not every detail of the fight will be covered, just the necessities. The Blade Lord encounter is a simple movement execution fight. This encounter will test the raid's ability to move, making it yet another raid competency check. Like the Zorlok encounter, it builds on the concept of avoiding, spreading out, and stacking. Our recommended raid comp is 2 tank, 2 heals, and 6 DPS. You can choose to have a third healer, but it will require your DPS to execute the boss's second phase flawlessly, as the boss does have an enrage timer. At the beginning of the encounter, we have our range and heals spread out in the left wing hall of the room. We have the tanks and melee DPS stacked towards the middle of the hall, with our hunter misdirecting the boss to the tanks. Please note that this isn't a necessary step in the encounter. It simply allows for less movement and readjusting for the tanks. As soon as the main tank has positioned the boss, pop Heroism, Lust, or Time Warp. This is the best opportunity for this, as most of Phase 2 you will not be DPSing but running and dodging. Once the boss is pulled, he begins his rotation of his 4 major abilities, but also an internal countdown clock starts. Every 60 seconds for the duration of the encounter, the Blade Lord will gain a total increase to damage dealt and haste by 5%, making both Phase 1 and 2 increasingly more difficult, and his abilities rotating into play faster and faster during Phase 1. The boss has 4 major abilities that will be continually implored throughout Phase 1. The 4 abilities of the boss are Wind Step, Tempest Slash, Unseen Strike, and Overwhelming Assault. Overwhelming Assault is the ability that the tanks must pay attention to. Because of this ability, this fight must be 2 tank. Tanks must tank swap at 2 stacks of Overwhelming Assault. If a third blow is landed on a tank, he will be one-shotted. Overwhelming Assault hits the current tank with 150% of his melee swing, but leaves a debuff that exposes his defenses by 100% for the next Overwhelming Assault, which lasts for 45 seconds. The reason we swap at 2 and not at 1 is because of his Intensify ability, which runs throughout the encounter. His strikes will increasingly become faster and faster. Debuffs will not have enough time to wash off if tanks simply swap at 1 stack as the fight progresses. Taking a third blow means a killing blow, if the tank already has 2 lingering debuffs. The boss's Tempest Slash ability strikes a target for 100,000 nature damage and causes a knockback if hit by the tornado that comes out. It is because of this ability that we start the boss in one of the halls. The tornadoes that spawn from his Tempest Slash strike will linger until the boss enters Phase 2. Simply slow kite the boss to the other hall as the rooms fill with tornadoes. Do not have ranged DPS close to the melee or at the backside of the boss, as the tanks need the space to kite the boss. Have range and heal stay either on the far side of the boss or at the sides of the room, leaving a clear path for kiting. The boss has 2 abilities that can be heal intensive if the mechanics are not followed through. The first, Wind Step, is an ability that targets the ranged players. The boss instantly jumps to a random ranged player, striking them. The boss leaves a lingering debuff that lasts for 30 seconds and ticks every 3 seconds for 80,000 damage. This might not seem heal intensive, but if ranged DPS are within 8 yards of the player that gets hit, any players within this 8-yard range now has the debuff. We have range spread out throughout the sides and the far end of the boss at an 8-yard minimum distance. Maintain this distance. Once tornadoes begin to spawn and overcrowd available positioning for range, slowly move the boss to alleviate the situation. His 4th and more devastating ability is Unseen Strike. As the name indicates, the boss disappears, but he leaves a target icon over the player he selects. He will always hit the player from the back, so the frontal cone of the ability will be laid out wherever the player is facing. Make sure players stack in front of the targeted player so they get hit by Unseen Strike. Unseen Strike hits for 3 million damage. The cone disperses this 3 million amongst all players within the cone. The more in the cone, the less intensive the damage overall will be for the healers. You need about 6 to 7 players to be hit minimum. If only 3 players get hit, chances are that all 3 players just died. This ability also performs a knockback once it lands, so do not channel a big AoE heal spell before the blow, as it will only be interrupted. To help with this ability, whenever he executes this on one of our Shadow Priests, they take the entire brunt of the blow on their own by popping Dispersion. We have tried letting our mage ice block the damage, but ice block does not seem to prevent the blow. It's a matter of trial and error for certain classes. If you have a paladin, have him try Hand of Protection and his Divine Shield. Hand of Protection is supposed to prevent physical damage, and this ability is purely physical. There's no guarantee that these abilities will work, just a recommendation to attempt it. Dispersion, however, is a definite workable ability to prevent this raid-wide damage. Right before the boss hits 20% of his health, have all players dot the boss. When he hits 20% health, the Blade Lord traps players in a group of tornadoes and moves them to the opposing end of the hall from him. Have everyone healed to full before beginning the dance. Throughout this phase you will suffer 15,000 nature damage a second, not just when players are sucked into a tornado from failure to sidestep. Once everyone is healed to full or close to, we move as a group, having our druid cast his stampeding roar. This phase is the competency and reaction time check. You must dodge tornadoes. If you get sucked into a tornado, you will be pulled back about 50 meters before resuming your dance back to the boss. Healers cannot wait for every player if they are sucked into a tornado. The weakest links need to die, as healers need to make it to the other end so that they can channel spellcasts. Healers need to hot players on the move, but do not sit and channel spells during the dodge dance. If healed to full before the run out, all players can make it to the boss before dropping below 30%, even without a single heal during the run. The importance of this fight is to get to the boss itself and stack along the far wall. Do not get overconfident or zoned in to reaching the boss. The spawn location for the tornadoes are the more challenging dodge. Wait a split second for one to spawn, then run where the last one just spawned. The tornadoes at the spawn spot seem to have a wide grip range and will pull players back from the steps even if it appears you are out of the red zones. The boss is non-tankable during this phase. He still gains his Intensify buff, making him spin and inflict more damage increasingly faster. After killing 10% of his health, the boss flies to the other end of the hall. Tornadoes reverse direction, and players are once again forced to trek the entirety of the room while avoiding tornadoes to reach the boss. Again, make sure to heal the raid before moving out. It will make it far easier, and players are more likely to survive the damage output. As always, thank you for watching our tutorial. Special thanks goes out to the guild Ashes on Sargeras. If you found this video helpful, feel free to subscribe to the channel and like our video. And as always, happy raiding.